It is time for a review. Hope everyone's having a good day. It's time to do, check this out, a quick review of this new Brian McKnight album, An Evening with Brian McKnight. Or An Evening with. Anywho, Brian McKnight, R&B singer, songwriter, fantastic musician. No, really, I mean truly, Brian McKnight is such an amazing songwriter, such an incredible vocalist, a musician. The guy just makes good music and has been making it for a very long time. Brian McKnight is actually one of my favorite singers and songwriters. I think he's very underrated. He's kind of an artist that gets lost on people my generation and younger. I mean, I remember Brian McKnight songs being played on the radio as a small child, but you know those born after people our age. It's kind of lost on him, and that's really sad. But apparently, Brian McKnight has come out with An Evening with this live album, and wow, I don't use this word that much, especially this year with all the garbage music that's come out. But let me say, this album is fantastic. I was a bit skeptical about this because live albums are not something I'm crazy about in general. I've just never really liked the live album. I've never understood it, one, because I thought, why would you listen to a concert on a disc? Why would you not just either listen to the original album or go to the concert? Or why would you not put the concert on DVD so you can at least see it? But as I get older, not that I'm crazy about them, I'm a little bit better with them. But live albums are hit or miss. They're either really good and they change things up and they sound great, or they're just, you realize an artist doesn't really sound that good live. Either that or the recording quality is just so horrible and you can't really hear it. Especially with this album being on an independent label, I was like, oh man, a live album on an indie label, this might be kind of rough. This thing kicks off with Find Myself in You, and then it goes into Used to Be My Girl, and it just, he just comes out with a boom, starts it out sexy, but then brings in a lot of energy, does a couple of newer tracks that I've never heard. And this album really takes its time. That's the one thing, I've only been to one R&B concert ever in my life, and that was when I saw Joe, Kim, and Charlie Wilson. It was a phenomenal show. But R&B concerts are a totally different element from a rock or a country or a pop concert. Like, they take their sweet time, man. Like, they give you music, they give you vibes, they talk to you. They really set the mood. And that's what this album does. A lot of the opening tracks on here go into the 5.5, 6 minute mark. Solos and breakdowns and changing it up. And some of the things that really surprised me about this record sound-wise was, one, is that Brian McKnight sounds just as good, in my opinion better, than he did back in his quote-unquote prime, back in the late 90s with the Anytime and the Back at One era. He sounds dang good. He's hitting the same notes. He's not changing the key of the songs. He's hitting the same notes, the same runs. He's actually kind of fine-tuned his voice a little bit more. And also the recording quality of this. While I'll say this, it's not incredibly loud. It is not the most crystal clear thing. It is very clear for the label it's on. And instead of making the mistake that some live albums do, and that is trying to make it sound like a studio track with a crowd in the background, it tries to capture that concert surround sound feel. And so when you put this in, the way the sound is captured, the kind of mics they use, when you turn it up, and if you close your eyes, it really does sound like you're at the concert. And that is hard to do with a live album. You can hear all the instruments pretty clearly, while at the same time you can hear the crowd as well. So you have these opening tracks here, some newer tracks, some songs I'm not totally familiar with, but it doesn't mean that Brian sounds bad. The musicianship on this thing is fantastic. The guitar playing, the keyboard playing, a handful of solos in here, keyboard solo, guitar solo. They do a great job on some of these tracks. But then really the meat of this album, where he does some of his hits like 6-8-12 and Back at One and Anytime. Yes. He also does a song by Van Morrison, which I'm not a Van Morrison fan, but I did see in the notes that he wrote this song. is a song called Crazy Love. I have not heard the original, and after hearing Brian McKnight's version, I really don't want to. The R&B stylings of this cover just sound really sexy and really good, and you have these two different elements playing together to create something quite nice. So, you know, he does his hits for the middle part of this album. He kind of closes it out with a couple of his hits, Anytime and Back at One, and then he does a song called Fall 5.0, which I have not heard before, so I guess it's a newer track, but I really, really, really like it. I love the melody of it, and I love the guitars on this track. I love the happy, feel-good vibes of it, which Brian McKnight is very good at. Closes out with a piano ballad called Steel. Never heard that before, but he sounded good. It was a good way to close out the record, and it goes into a few tracks that are not live, but they're just kind of bonus new releases from him. Everything, Forever, Brothers in the End, which these songs are okay. I mean, Brian McKnight definitely has still got it, still a good songwriter, but I wasn't necessarily crazy about these tracks. The one I enjoyed the most, though, was Everything. I like that track. This album is so good. Like, this is why we need more R&B like live albums. Like I've only heard a couple of live R&B albums, you know, and I'm thinking Alive in '75 by Earth, Wind and Fire, and Donny Hathaway's live and Donny Hathaway's in performance. But when R&B singers do live albums, they turn out so good. And like this album just thoroughly surprised me. Not only like I didn't know it was being released, but how good it sounds, how on point Brian McKnight is. Really, my only beef with this album, one, is there were a couple songs I would have liked to hear him do on here, but then again, they weren't really necessarily hits. They're just personal favorites, so I get it. And the only thing I really didn't like as far as musical choices and stylings went is when he does one of his hits, The Only One for Me, which is a great track off the Anytime album. He kind of slowed it down during the middle and put this weird breakdown in there and kind of overdid it a little bit. And I get it, that's kind of what R&B guys do sometimes, but with this track, don't kill the vibe, man. Do it on a different one. Do it on one of your newer tracks that no one knows or really cares about yet. But The Only One for Me, oh, it's classic. Don't mess it up. This album is great. This is honestly probably one of my favorite things that's come out this year. I'm so happy about this. This really just made my day. It was a nice unexpected surprise, and I can't wait to continue to listen to it even more. Wait for it, a B+. That's a dang good rating. If you enjoy actual music and not this EDM, click and drag, vocal sample, synthesizer crap that's on the radio right now, if you don't like that stuff, then you will like this album, because this is musicianship, this is performance, this is real art, this is just, you know, you can hear the passion coming from these musicians on this album, and it's good. Short, sweet, to the point. Brian McKnight, Evening With. Thank you.